So with the release of Houdini 18, there was a node that was completely rewritten from scratch, and it now gives us some really nice options that make it much more applicable, much more viable for actually using it in production without much hassle in terms of making it look good. And the node is called Height Field Terrace. Height Field Terrace. Okay, so I'm starting with the file from the end of lesson 13, where we were exploring the masks. You should have something that will look something like this. So this is what we were exploring, some of the mask features. But I'm going to connect the terrace before all that. So this is the work we were exploring the masks with. And this is the height field that we have. And I'm just going to connect this to the terrace node. Okay, so the terrace is going to do something like this. It's not going to be very visible on this because we don't have a lot of height. So before we actually connect this into the terrace, let's just scale up the height values that we have here. I'm going to create a height field wrangle. And let's just say that the height values will be equal to multiplied by and equal to 2. Okay, so now we're kind of just scaling it up, scaling the values twice. Okay, so we have more of a mountain look for this. Now, when you apply the terrace now, another thing that's kind of in the way of us being able to see what's exactly happening is the mask. So let's clear the mask. So I'll create a height field mask clear. And that way we can see what's happening. So the terrace node operator is basically going to create this stepping effect based on the height. On the previous version, you didn't have as much control as you have now. So you basically just had these controls where you would establish the step size that you wanted, and that would be applied all over the terrain. Now it's not exactly like that. We have much more control. So let's have a look at what we can do with this. Now, the first thing you should do is compute the range. Basically, this is what this is going to do. It's going to go all over it's going to go the range. It's going to go through the values of your height field, and it's going to detect what's the maximum and the minimum, and it's going to adapt to that range properly. Okay, so this is what we get with the terrace node. Now, the difference between this version and the new version and the previous version, the main difference is that now we have here a section for terracing, where we can control the step size based on the height. So this is 0. This is the minimum value of the height, and this is the maximum value of the height. And you can create variation along the height of your field. Let's say for now, right now the default value for the maximum step size is 20. And if I go to the step ramp, let's say I put a node here. And what I'm saying is, let's put this here. So from the minimum value all the way up to the medium value, half the height, I will have half of the step size. Okay, so as you can see, this is small, and then it gets big. And the beauty of this is that you can not just control where the variations occur, but you can create as many variations as you want. Let's say I want this section to be even smaller. And as you can see, I'm making this lower part very small, and then it gets big. This alone already gives it a much more interesting result than what we would get. Of course, we could get the same type of effect with the previous node, but it would just require you to combine use different techniques to combine different terrace operators. And this way it gets much much easier to achieve an interesting result. Okay, the other thing you can do, let's say just to emphasize the fact that you can make this big and then small again. Okay, so now we have some nice variation, which tends to make, whenever we break apart a pattern, it tends to make things much more natural. The other thing we have is controls like the fade ramp. The fade ramp allows us to control how much of this effect is faded, again based on the height. You do have a global fade parameter that can kind of fade away the effect, as you can see here. I think one thing we can do in terms to make this a bit more visible is we can actually resample this. Let's resample, height field resample, and let's just double the resolution. Not 20, double. So now we have a lot more resolution, and as you can see, we have sharper details. So here on the terrace, you can really see that if we have no fade, we have some really sharp steps happening. One way of blurring out the steps is by using the fade, which will affect everything globally. Okay, this is one way of working with it. The other way is you can use the fade ramp, and the fade ramp will give you a ramp so that you can control how that happens. So let's say that I want the fade to be very high on the here at the bottom, and then I want it to be kind of, let me make sure that this interpolations get more wrong. And let's say I want this one to be the fade here. Actually, let's remove this one and let's just use one. So now what I'm saying is that I'll have a lot of fade on the top, and as you can see, little stepping, so more erosion here because these are more exposed to the wind and the elements, okay, because they're higher. The bottom as well, because we can think about how the sediment will tend to accumulate at the bottom, so it makes sense that we have a bit more fading happening at the bottom. And then on the middle part is where we're gonna have more stepping happening. Okay, so again, this is really nice control to have implemented inside the terrace operator itself, instead of having to rely on a complicated mixture of different types of terrace and masts and all that stuff. Okay. The other thing you have besides the terracing is the undulations. The undulations will basically add a bit of detail to the surfaces. You will have you will also be generating different layers. A layer that will have the mask for the step front and for the mesa. It's called the mesa, which is these flat areas. And those are the ones that are going to be most affected by the undulation. Let's say we have the standard type. Let's increase the intensity and reduce the size element. Okay, so this is what's happening. We can also add some fractal to this, so it's kind of a bit more complex. Okay, so we're adding a bit of irregularity to those flat terraces. Okay, it's another nice option to have implemented in the terrace node itself. And finally, here on the output layers, you can check it out. So we have the mesa and the cliffs. Okay, and this will basically just give you, we can actually have a look at it using the same techniques as we've used before. So let's say connect it here. And let's say we want to see the mesa. Okay, so these are the plateaus. And we have the cliffs. Okay, really interesting masks to have, meaning that layers to have that you can bring into masks and manipulate them. Now, even with all these extra elements that you have, there is of course a pattern that's very, very clear, very evident, and you might want to kind of break things up a bit. I'm just going to show you how easy it is for you to break things up. So let's say you have this height fill terrace and you're pretty happy with what you have, but you'd like to kind of break up the effect so that it's not as continuous and uniform all over the place. Now what you can do is let's create a copy of this terrace. This is the first one that we created. Let's keep the terrace one as the original. Let's keep looking at this. This was just a temporary thing. And on this second one, we can change the graph that we have here on the terracing. Let's change things a bit. Let's say we can even start by coming here to the maximum step size, and let's say the maximum for the second one is 16, and we will have these things in different locations on a different order. Let's say we start big, then we get small, then a bit bigger, and then slightly smaller, or something like that. Something like that. So this is a completely different look if we connect this one. So this is one effect, this is the other effect. So they will be offset and with different rhythms. And now what we can do is I'm gonna create another mask clear for this one. Now we have this one and this one, and what we can do is we can combine both of them with just a generic mask. Let's say we generate P1, just trying to organize this. So we did a scale, we resampled, and we generated two different terraces. Let's put the first one on the left, then the second one, and then let's create the mask. So height field noise, mask noise. So this is the mask we have. Let's say the element size, let's go to 200, and I'm going to remap, height field remap. It's easier to just control the contrast with a remap. So we do not want to, I'm not interested in remapping the height, but the mask. And here I just want to kind of make sure we have more contrast. Yeah, something like this. It's going to be contrasted enough. Yeah, so on some areas we'll be looking at one terrace, and on the other areas we'll be looking at the other one. Let's create a height fill layer, and let's connect everything. So this, the first one, the second one, and the mask that's going to be combining both. Okay, so as you can see now, it seems barely noticeable, but in fact you can clearly see the difference. So this is one, this is two, and this is a combination of both. Okay, which helps us break up that uniform pattern. Of course, you can come here to your mask noise, further reduce this to have more breaks happening. Okay. You can also increase the contrast if you want. I'm still giving it a good amount of transition, but you can make it sharper. Okay, so this is 2, and this is with the combination. The other thing to keep in mind is that you might like to kind of mask this out. We are using the fade ramp to generate sort of an automatic mask to control where the terrace is happening with more intensity or less intensity. But you can do that yourselves. Let's create a height field mask by feature. Let's have a look at it. And let's say we just want, let's use this slope by itself. Okay. And let's have a look at what this does when we connect it here to the mask of the first terrace. As you can see, immediately we kind of clear out. You can see the difference between having disconnected or not. Okay, we have terrace all over, and with this we don't. So the areas at the bottom aren't affected. Now, there is a tendency for this to create this type of sharp ridges. Okay, some hard transitions between one thing and the other, as you can see here. And if you don't like that, just make sure to kind of blur out your mask. Height field blur, mask blur. This allows us to kind of have a bit more of a transition area, and this will be a better solution for us to apply that mask. Look at that. Okay, so without the blur, sorry, just meant to disconnect this. So without the blur, we get all this, a lot of noise, and here we have better transitions. And you can use the same mask for both variations. It's totally fine. Okay, so now we have this one, we have this one, and we're mixing both with another mask. If you want to check out how this looks with your original height range, then you just need to disable this, the height field wrangle. I'm just height field scale, I'll call this scale height. Okay, if we turn this off, we need to recompute, tell the height field terraces to compute range again for it to work properly, and you get something like this. Pretty neat. Cool. Hope you enjoyed. This was just a quick video to update you on the new terrace features for Houdini 18.